Hi guys, Luke here from Hands and Heels Racing. So I've already done the other 9 races on Melbourne Cup day for Flemington. So this video is just going to be a detailed analysis of the Melbourne Cup, the main race of the day, and for all the once-a-year punters, it's the race they like to have a little bit of an interest in. So we're just going to do that race. For anyone wanting tips for the rest of the day, we've got another YouTube video, as I just said, so you can search for that one, or you can follow us on Facebook as well at Hands and Heels Racing. We've got a Facebook page. Tips go on there as well. So we'll get stuck into the Melbourne Cup. So 24 runners. What I'm going to do is go through each runner, talk about their pros and cons, and then I'll give you my final 4 numbers at the end of the race. So Hartnell. So he was a favourite last year in this race and ran 3rd, but difference this time around is his form isn't as good coming in. So I think this time last year he smashed Jamaica in the Turnbull Stakes, and then he went and he himself got smashed by Winks in the Cox Plate. So, but he came here, ran pretty creditably. Probably, so with Hartnell, I think 3,200 metres isn't his best distance. I think he's probably a 2,000 metre horse. You know, he's won as short as 1,400 this prep. He won first up over 1,400 metres, and then he's probably gotten worse each run since. Second up, he wasn't too bad though, and Humidor beat him. But and then 3rd up, he was quite good too. I just think, really, his form's not that bad, except if you can scrap his last start in the Caulfield Stakes. But it's a bit of time off. It's like it's a last-minute decision that they've gone to the Melbourne Cup. They haven't disclosed what his targets are. So I'm against the preparation. I don't think he's necessarily been trained to run for the Melbourne Cup, maybe until the last sort of 10 days, or even 2 weeks, I thought about doing it. I think distance is a bit too far for him. I think he can run creditably over it, but I think his form isn't as good as last year as well. Then obviously you throw in the top weight, you're having a look elsewhere. You can make a case for him at $27 though, because I mean, if you're a Hartnell fan and you're on last year at $5, it's hard to be like, well, is he that much worse of a horse this year? It deserves to be $27, but I can't have him. There's too many negatives for me. Our Mandan, last year's winner. I think the interesting, Amanda's a hard runner this year to get a guide on, because last year, so I backed Amanda last year at $67 in futures markets, and I've obviously got a soft spot for him. And the reason for that was Amanda was a German horse, and he beat Protectionist, who won the Melbourne Cup, I think, a couple of years ago now, in Germany. So based off that, you go, okay, this horse, if he brings that form, is good enough to win a race like the Melbourne Cup. Okay, then he's out of Monson, which is the same sire as Fiorente, so that's a tick as a Melbourne Cup sire as well, so that's a little bit of a thing there. I was a big fan of Fiorente as well. And then he was disappointing his first 2 runs in Australia. Apparently he'd been here for a while, he got injured, I think, and then he took a while to acclimatise, but then he stepped up to 2,400 metres and he came out and won with a much improved performance. And then he got entered for the Bart Cummings, and the winner of that race goes straight into the Melbourne Cup. Emily Starr won that this year. So I liked him for the Bart Cummings because I felt like he turned a corner. That was my thinking with Amanda, and he was 67 for the Melbourne Cup, and I thought, okay, well, if he wins this race, he's going to start a hell of a lot shorter in the Melbourne Cup, and obviously I was a bit fortuitous that it actually come off for me. But his preparation was sort of got better each run. I think his first 2 runs were disappointing, turned the corner, then he sort of steadily improved and ran the best race of his prep in the Melbourne Cup. This preparation he didn't have a run in the autumn, so in his favour, they've put everything in this. All their attention has been for our man to win the Melbourne Cup again. So I think last year, obviously they were probably wanting to go to the Melbourne Cup with him, but I think after his first 2 runs, they're like, shit, he's not going very well. Maybe once after on the 2,400 metre race, they said, okay, now we're going to target the Cup. I think this time round, they've had a whole 12 months to go. This is the race, the only race we care about going back to back. He resumed first up with a huge run first up, with a big weight, much better than his form from last spring. And then his second up run, where he won by 5 lengths over the 2,500 metres at Flemington, was probably just as good, if not better, than his Melbourne Cup win last year. So my angle with Almandan is that he's actually come back a better horse this preparation. And if you take out his last start disappointment, he's probably $2.70 or something here. Probably close to a moral. The question is last start. What happened last start? My theory is, I heard, I think it could have been Clint Hutchinson or somebody on racing.com talk about our man, and they thought the stable could have perhaps thought, when he won so well second up, gee, this horse is absolutely flying at the moment. We better take it easy on him because we don't want him to, you know, let's say we give him another run before the Cup and that's his best performance and he starts to train off by the time the Cup's around. Their theory was that potentially they've done nothing with him between the second and third up runs, hence why it was a bit disappointing. And now they've screwed him down again for the Melbourne Cup. You know, the fact that he was so good second up, you can't say the horse isn't going as well as last year. He just had one flat run. So, and if I watch the Bart Cummings replay again, and it's not like the horse was off the bit early. He loomed into it on the bridle. He looked like the winner, probably 300 out. And that last 100, he petered out on his run. You got to remember he's carrying 60 kilos there as well. So I felt like it was a horse who lacked, you know, that last 100 metres. He should have, because he won't have the same distance to start before. But if they've done no work with him, that would explain him knocking up the last 100. So potentially that's the angle I'm taking. We're getting $8.50 to find out, because I think, like I said, if you take that run out, he's probably a $2.70 chance. So he's won the race before. He's obviously good enough to do it. He's got a bigger weight this year. I think he's drawn well. Frankie Dettori hasn't won before. People see that as a negative. I think a good jockey's a tick, obviously, but I think a lot of the time jockeys are victim of circumstances. I'm not that fussed on who's on a horse sometimes. You know, and there's no reason why an apprentice can't give a horse a gem of a ride. Just sometimes, you know, their plan A will work out and they get him into a good spot. And, you know, everyone says the Merchant Navy ride on Saturday in the Coolmore was a great ride by Mark Zara, but I think a lot of the times as well, he could have made a pilot error, and by his own error, he's ended up having to go back to the inside, and things have panned out for him, and it looks brilliant at the end of the race. But that's all I'm saying with Frankie. I don't believe in these omens that he can't ride, you know, a Melbourne Cup winner. Of course he can. You know, there's no reason why he can't give Armandin a gem of a ride. Humidor, probably best horse in race. He's probably the best horse in the country besides Winks. The only horse I've seen taking ground off Winks, you know, over 2,000 metres, you know, when she's in full flight. He's a bit of a nutcase, Humidor, but he's a clearly talented horse. Humidor, the problem with Humidor is his best form's at 1,600 and 2,000 metres. He's had 3 runs at 2,400 metres and hasn't performed at his best 3 times. Now the question is whether you can make excuses for him outside of not running the distance at 2,400. You could say, okay, well maybe it was his 6th run in the preparation, he was trained off. Maybe in the Caulfield Cup he was ridden upside down and, you know, he needs to be ridden at the back and finishing off hard. That's a fairly legitimate excuse. But I spoke to somebody the other day and they said, I like what they said, they don't like making excuses for horses once, let alone 3 times. And that's a fair comment. And, you know, the fact that he's 2,400 metres is a question mark for him. What about 3,200? It's another 800 metres. You know, he's up in the weights as well. I'm against him. I just don't think he runs a trip. He's a good enough horse. If he wins, he wins. If he runs a distance, he probably wins, but I just don't think he does. And with a race like this, I'm going to be critical, guys. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, it's easy. It's hard to find the winner. There's 24 runners. Only one of them can win. I'm probably most likely not going to pick the winner. I hope I do. I hope my analysis is around the mark, but they're all good horses, and this is the kind of race where you got to pretty much say, this is the negative or 2 that I'm against, I'm penning it. You know, and that's just the kind of race it is. Can't back all of them. Alright, so we go down, Tiberian. So, French overseas runner, in good form. You know, when he forms, good form. So, he comes over, he's won at 3,000 metres before, so the distance isn't a problem. Bad gate. Gate 23 is a problem. Of course, I mean, you don't want to be drawing out there. And the first run in Australia is a problem too. So we saw Heartbreak City perform well at his first run in Australia in last year's Cup. He come 2nd. So, you know, they can perform well when they get off the plane, but no horse has won, I think it was since 1993, first up off the plane. So that's a big statistic against. But like I said, these horses don't know these statistics. They're going to run up to, you know, how they feel on the day, and they'll run up to their ability. So I think Tiberian at $31 isn't hopeless. I think the good thing with him is that he can stay. And these internationals, what I'll say about the internationals is that it's hard to be confident with them, because you've seen a horse like Red Cadeau. He's running, say, reasonably poorly overseas, getting beaten by horses like Sea Moon overseas, and then he come here first year in the Melbourne Cup and ran a big race at $31 and lost by a lip. And then you have a horse like Sea Moon, who is a very good overseas horse, comes over to Australia with all the wraps on it, and just, for whatever reason, didn't perform to nowhere near the level it did overseas. So Some horses run a lot better in Australia from their European form. Other runners don't perform. Some of the fancy ones don't perform. So it's a bit of a dartboard job and a bit of a guess as to how he's going to run in Australia. So I just spoke about the pros and cons. I think he's in the mix and he'll probably be in my quaddie. Marmello, I think Marmello ticks probably a lot of boxes. He's won at 3,000 metres. He's had the run in Australia, which is a big tick, and he closed off on the Caulfield Cup. So it was a very good Melbourne Cup trial. The bookies didn't miss it. He got come into about $7 at the time. He's jumped back out to about the $10. Now back into $9. I think he's going to be he's a very likeable runner. He's got Hugh Bowman. Barrier 16 is wide-ish, but I don't think it's that bad because I think he'll go probably back to beyond midfield and get some cover. I think our man drew barrier 16 last year as well, so you know he'll improve for the run. He'll improve with appreciate the extra distance. Flemington will suit. Ticks probably every box, so I think he's a very good chance. No real negatives really there. Red Cardinal, he was a bit of a spruik runner, but his last start was poor. He was in form prior to that, and he's from the Andreas Waller yard. There's a protectionist trainer, so they've got the connection, and they've brought protectionist over. So I think they probably have an idea of what kind of horse to bring over and target the race. He's got a gun jockey, last year's winner, Kerry McAvoy. Now the negatives, barrier 24, very tricky. I mean, it's very hard to win from barrier 24. And his last start was a bit of a disappointment. He was beaten by Marmello by 6 lengths. So if I'm comparing Red Cardinal to Marmello beat him last start by 6 lengths, and he's had the run in Australia and ran quite well. So it's pretty hard to make a case to back Red Cardinal unless for some sick reason he's going to love Australia and exceed his European form. So it's hard to be enthusiastic about his chances when I'm comparing him to Marmello. Johannes Vermeer, he's had the 2 runs in Australia now. He's got 2,000, 2,400. Now goes third up into the Melbourne Cup. So I actually like that preparation. I think it's very, very good. He's ran 2 creditable races in Group 1s. He second in the Caulfield Stakes at weight for age, behind it was Galo Chop, and then he ran 3rd in the Caulfield Cup, being a bit held up. I thought he ran okay, but I thought he had every sort of chance in the Caulfield Cup. I thought Marmello's run was just as good, if not better. But then the query of Johannes Vermeer is he hasn't been tested for further than 2,400 metres. In fact, he's been more of a 2,000 metre horse. There were some people saying, is he as effective at 2,400 as 2,000? So he has to be a big distance query, although he is at a Galileo, which is, breeding says 3,200 should be fine. Maybe has a United States kind of feel. United States was a good 2,000 metre horse, but ran okay in the Melbourne Cup. But his best distance was probably 2,000 metres, and he was out of Galileo as well. So I think Johannes Vermeer's got a beautiful barrier. He's well weighted. I think he ticks boxes except for the distance box, and that's a big issue because if you don't run 3,200 strongly, you've got no chance of winning this race. So at $10, the same kind of price as Marmello. Once again, I'm preparing a runner like Marmello. So I'll continue to refer back to runners because that's the best way to do it. Because you can make pros and cons, but you've got to have. It's like doing a beep test if you're doing fitness. Okay, it's one thing getting the number, but how do you know it's good? You've got to compare it to something. So the best way to start crossing runners off in this race is to start using something as a bit of a benchmark. Red Cardinal, I can pen Red Cardinal. Once again, with these international runners, they can come over and improve out of sight, but I'm going to pen him based off my comparison to Marmello. So we'll go down to Bondi Beach. I've got to put a pen through him. His performance is, I think he's ran twice in the Melbourne Cup now. This will be his 3rd year. He's performed poorly twice, and his runs in Australia, they've kept him in Australia, have been poor. Got to be against him. I mean, there's no positives there for him. Max Dynamite. So he was 2nd in the Melbourne Cup behind Prince of Penzance. So and he's a bit of a hurdler. So his last start was over 3,400 metres. Distance is absolutely no query. We know he runs a strong 3,200 metres. Barrier 2 is a soft barrier. I think he had a very soft barrier when 2nd behind Prince of Penzance that year. So, he clearly ran well in Australia before at this track in this race, which is a big bonus. You've got to have big attention to that. But if I'm looking through his form, he's now 8 years old and he's probably not going as well as he was when he came over last time. I think he was in winning form when he came over last time to Australia. So that's my query, is he going as well? And he's a hard runner. He's a hard runner pen or leave out of a quaddie, but I can't. I'm not going to put 9 in my quaddie. I'm going to cap mine at 6, and he's the one I'm going to leave out because I'm just saying he's not going as well as last year. Not as last year, 2 years ago. He didn't run last year. Ventura Storm, I'm simply just can't back him off his Caulfield Cup run. He was profiling quite well before that, beat home Humidor in the Turnbull Stakes, but he pulled up the lane from the Caulfield Cup, which is never good going into the main event. He's also untested at 3,200 metres. I think he's run up to 2,600 or 2,700, so he probably gets the distance. But when he's from that Hayes and Dabney yard, and I just think sometimes, the last 2 weeks, some of their runners haven't been going that well. They had a great day on Caulfield Cup Day, but they had that tendency to give them one run too far, and I think even if Ventura Storm is cooked, I don't think the stable will expel him. I think they're going to run him anyway, even if they probably know he's cooked. That's just that stable. So I can't have him off his last run. If you're happy to forgive his Caulfield Cup run and you know the horse is right, at $35 he's a good each way chance because prior to that his form was good. Who Shot the Barman scratched? He had an elevated temperature. I was very keen to back him to run top 10. He was $3.50, probably an absolute model to run top 10. He's come fourth 2 years I think, fourth or fifth, and the other year he came 11th when unlucky. So he's a horse that stays 3,200. But I'm not going to dwell on him anymore. I just think half this field will be gasping for oxygen at the end of the race, where Who Shot the Barman would have been picking them off and running top 10. But he's scratched with an elevated temperature, and that's probably surely him. For the Melbourne Cup, he's 9 years old, next year he'll be 10. Wicklow Brave ran in last year's Cup. He was actually reasonably fancied last year. His form isn't as good this time round. So his European form isn't as good this time round, and he's 9 years old. They did bring him out for a run this year in the Caulfield Cup, which is a positive, but it's not really a positive if you perform poorly, and he didn't perform very well in the Caulfield Cup. So, when you take the angle of his SP price last year and his best runs in the UK, you've got to be like, okay, well maybe there's worse $51 shots, but then there's current form and there's his last start run and his age factor as well, and I've got to be against. Big Duke. So I'm on Big Duke pretty heavily, not with a lot of confidence now. I've sort of followed him this spring and I sort of like the way he campaigned and wasn't too aware of the international runners, but obviously this race is always strong. I should have known that, and Big Duke's probably outclassed, but in his favour. So we'll talk about his positives. So he's got a soft draw, barrier 5 is beautiful for him. Brenton Avdullah's a very good jockey. I like the jockey engagement. Darren Weir trained Prince of Penzance to this, and he's a better horse than Prince of Penzance. So, the trainer's a tick as well. He ran 3rd in the Sydney Cup in the autumn, so he's got a pretty good 3,200 metre run under his belt. He's coming in like 7th up, I think, which means he's rock hard fit. This has been the main target. He's dropping weight off his last couple of runs. So he ticks a few boxes. I think he can run a competitive race. The question mark is just the class. I think he's a horse, sometimes there's a horse that they can, I think Milwaukee's the one. If you look at my other Flemington preview of the other races, Milwaukee wrote down Rocks and Diamonds. He can win the race, but he's a reasonable chance to finish last. Big Duke's probably never going to finish last here, but I think his peak is probably not good enough to win this race unless he goes to a new level. And as a 6-year-old horse who's 7th up in this prep, probably hasn't got a whole heap of upside. I think he can run honestly, but I don't think he is much of a winning chance, but then I don't think he's going to run poorly as well. So hopefully for me, I'm on at $41 each way. I hope he can run a big race. I'll be crossing my fingers, but at this stage, looking at the race for what it is now, I think there's better chances. US Army Ranger, his overseas form isn't that great. He has got the odd strong runs sprinkled in amongst some poor runs. So once again, it's hard to pen them, especially when they're $67, and these runners can just come over and spike out of sight in Australia. He's got a bad gait as well. I don't know, there's not much there. I mean, if you're looking for horses that tick boxes, like I'm going back to Marmello and horses like that. So I'll move on from him. I don't know a lot about him except that his form doesn't read that well. And obviously $67, the bookies don't think he's much hope either. Boom Time. So Boom Time and Single Gaze, I'm going to talk about them together. So they're the Caulfield Cup Quinella, and traditionally the Caulfield Cup Quinella, they're almost, they're in the top 4 or 5 in the market, yet we've got Boom Time at $27 and Single Gaze at $46. It's pretty sickening when you look at those prices and you just go, that has to be overs. It has to be overs, but then I look at the Caulfield Cup and it was an anomaly. How Boom Time just produced his peak out of nowhere. Even the trainer wasn't confident. The trainer was hoping he ran like top 9 or no, top 7, I think. You know, 3,200 metres is a question mark for boom time too. Breeding has to be a question mark for the distance. He did fail at the Sydney Cup, 3,200 metres in the autumn. I think it was, I can't remember if it was a heavy track that day. I think it was a heavy track that day, which could have been the problem for him. And also in Sydney way of going could have been a problem for him. So you can potentially forgive him there. I mean, if someone wants to back boom time at $27, I'm not going to talk him out of it, because at the end of the day, he's a Caulfield Cup winner and he was pretty dominant. He's not one of mine. I'm not going to jump on him now, and I have a distance query as well. I just think I'm happy to. He was in that fast lane at Caulfield, and yeah, can he repeat? I'm not confident he can. Trapeze Artist was almost similar to Boom Time in the sense that Trapeze Artist just PR'd out of nowhere and just produced his peak in the Golden Rose. But he come out in the Coolmore on Saturday and failed. So he's like, it doesn't make any sense that his form was terrible, produces spike in the Golden Rose and wins a Group 1 by 4 lengths, which is ridiculous, and then comes out and gets hammered again in another Group 1. Boom Time's form isn't as chalk and cheese, but I don't know. I can't back him off that one run. Galante's out of form, possibly can't back it. So on Single Gaze, we'll go back to I said I was going to do Boom Time and Single Gaze together. And Single Gaze as well. So Single Gaze tries her guts out. She's so honest. It's hard not to like her. She's an on-pace runner. She never runs poorly. She was huge in Caulfield Cup. She carted that field up to the tearaway leader, Sir Isaac Newton. And she was brave. She's out of a Not a Single Doubt. And it's hard to imagine a Not a Single Doubt, which is a speed sire. It's hard to imagine her running the 3,200 metres of the Melbourne Cup. But in her favour, I think her dam side there's a bit of Oaks or distance form in there, so which is where she's getting these staying performances from her mum's side. But to be fair, that Caulfield Cup was fast. So that Caulfield Cup was a fast pace, and she had the donkey work to do, and she still stuck on. So that bodes well. So if they get a slow Melbourne Cup, is the tempo that is a slow Melbourne Cup that much different to a fast Caulfield Cup where she's done the donkey work? Maybe she can stay. Maybe she can compete. I didn't think Criterion would run the Melbourne Cup distance out, and he ran a creditable third. But once again, it was a slow race that year, so she probably needs a slow tempo. And $46 is big overs. I'm probably not going to back her because I think at 3,200 metres there's going to be some horses that go past her, and she might run a creditable 6th, but I'm not going to get paid for her running 6th. Maybe I'll back her top 10. I don't know, but you know, if she doesn't run the distance, she probably won't run top 10. So maybe I just leave her. But I think if you're backing Single Gaze as well, I'm not going to talk you out of it because she just come second in the Caulfield Cup and she's bloody $46. So it's pretty nuts when you look at it from that angle. So go back up to Libran. So Who Shot the Barman and beat him last week, and I was referencing him in regards to Who Shot the Barman. So Who Shot the Barman beat him last week, and Who Shot the Barman has better 3,200 metre performances on the board. So I was always picking Who Shot the Barman over Libran, but there's no Who Shot the Barman now. So you know, if you like Big Duke, you've got to like Libran, who beat him last start, although Big Duke was unlucky. So I think Libran isn't hopeless. I think Libran has placed in the Sydney Cup before as well, and he ran well last week at 25. Not last week, 2 weeks ago, sorry, at Moonee Valley Cup, over 2,500 metres. He gets a lightweight, he gets a nice barrier. I think he ticks a few boxes. I think he lacks the class, and I'm not convinced 3,200 is his best trip. He can do worse. Once again, I'm not including him because I don't think he's a winning chance, but I'm not going to talk anyone out of a bet at $46 again. I think there's worse runners that I've proposed earlier on. We'll go to Nikita. I actually think this horse is probably the biggest overs, probably my best roughie of the race. Why? Because it's the winner of the same race as Heartbreak City last year. So Heartbreak City won the E-Ball handicap. It's normally quite a good form reference for the Melbourne Cup for overseas runners. And Nikita won that race as its last start. I think it was last start it won, yeah. Lightweight, drops 6 kilos off a lot of its runs. Proven distance horse. So to run the distance, it comes out of that good form reference. It's in form. I think it's overs. Barrier 19 is tricky. Glyn Schofield can be a rocks and diamonds kind of jockey, but once again, I'm not that fussed on who's on the horse. As I said, I think they can be a victim of circumstances. I think he's big overs at $35. I thought he'd be shorter than that. I thought he'd be 15s, and I'm referencing him towards a Max Dynamite and some other runners that are $17 from $15 to $17 from these overseas runners, and I like him as a better chance. Without a whole heap of confidence. I don't know how he's training in Australia. I don't know how he's going to perform in Australia, but that's just my read there. Wall of Fire has to be a big hope. I mean, I know a couple of guys that are on at $201, which is just nuts. I'm sure they're crossing their fingers, and they're a live hope. I think he's a great each way hope here. He ticks boxes. He actually profiles quite similar to Marmelo. So Wall of Fire has won, I think, up to, off the top of my head, I think it was 2,800 or something like that. I think even 3,000 he could have won. He's won at 3,200 twice, and he's missed the placings, but I think he wasn't that far away. I remember looking through the form earlier, and I remember saying I'm fine with the distance for him. I think he runs 3,200 fine. And he's had the leading run. So he had the leading run in Australia. He carried 58 kilos in the Herbert Power. So let's not forget, Protectionist. I think Protectionist ran second in the Herbert Power, and then went to the Melbourne Cup and won. Wall of Fire runs second in the Herbert Power. Now goes to the Melbourne Cup, so he comes to that similar Protectionist profile. He draws a mid-gate like Protectionist drew. I think Protectionist drew one of those barrier 15, 14 or something like that. Dunedin's drew that barrier. I think those barriers have got a pretty good record of late, those mid-barriers. And you've got our Mandan, Wall of Fire and Marmelo, which are kind of probably my top three, which you'll hear in a second, drawn in those gates. So he gets a good draw for his racing pattern, drops in weight, drops 5 kilos off the Herbert Power run. And his leading run was good. Only Lord Fandango beat him home. Lord Fandango should have placed in the Caulfield Cup. It was wide, no cover, stuck on for 4th. You know, so I think that form looks pretty good for here. I just think he profiles very well, ticks all the boxes. I'm more confident Marmelo's a better 3,000 metre or 3,200 metre horse than Wall of Fire. His 3,200 metre form is more proven. So that's one angle there as well, if you're comparing. But I think at $13 is a good each way hope. Thomas Hobson. So Thomas Hobson and Rick Kinling, I didn't have much of an idea on. But Thomas Hobson's a hurdler, so that's something that you can take note of, is that he's a hurdler. He will stay the distance, of course. He's run over 4,000 metres before. His form's quite good, except 2 starts ago, he ran poorly at 3,200 metres on a flat run. His last start was good, but it was over 4,000, and then his runs before that were over hurdles. So, you know, when I'm trying to limit my quaddy to 6 horses, I've actually got to put a line through Thomas Hobson, because I'm saying his hurdling form is good, but that's not that relevant here. Since he's been on the flats, his 4,000 metre run was good, but that could just mean that he's, you know, just an absolute one batter, and he wasn't so good over 3,200 metres, which means maybe he hasn't got the turn of foot to compete here. So that's just the angle I'm taking. I could be wrong, of course. Barrier 21's another issue. He has got the Magic Man. At $18, I prefer a horse like Nikita, who's double his price, as I was touching on earlier. So, Rekindling, the next one. So, he was second to Order of St. George, who is one of the better horses in the world. Order of St. George has come 2nd and 4th in the Arc de Triomphe now, which is short of his best distance. He was beaten 5 lengths by Order of St. George, I will say that, and did have weight relief. But I think that's still reasonable form. He beat Wicklow Brave 3 starts back. The thing with Rekindling, he's probably the weight runner. He gets 51.5 kilos, which is super light. He gets a soft draw in barrier 4. And, you know, he ran well over 2,900 last start. He'll stay the distance. Joseph O'Brien yard, I think he comes from a decent enough yard. I think he ticks enough boxes to be interested. $14 I thought was tight enough though. I thought that was quite short. You've got Wall of Fire with the leading run in Australia, where he's run well, comes out of the Herbert Power, good form reference, drops in weight. You've got that form, you've got him at $13 and you've got Rekindling at $14. So I think at the prices, I think I can trust Wall of Fire to perform better because he's had the run in Oz. But I think Rekindling has some appeal, and he'll be in my quaddie. So last 2 runners, Amelie Star. I would like her outside of a Caulfield Cup run, to be honest, because her record over 2,400 or further is very good. She failed in the Caulfield Cup. I'm not sure there's a real excuse there. She was ridden a bit upside down. She was ridden on pace. You know, that tearaway leader, and she got off the bit early trying to chase it. Obviously, probably didn't suit her running style. But, you know, she was on that inside area, which was the best part of the track. You know, if she was knocking up that race, is 3,200 metres a query? It has to be, because she's never been tried over further than 2,500. So I've got a distance query. I've got a query on her last run. Outside of that, I like Darren Weir. I like her barrier. I liked her form before that. She's got lightweight, and I've got a $61 ticket. I got on halfway through the Bart Cummings race, which was pretty good going by me. But you know, I think $18 is short enough for her as well with those queries. But you know, she's not hopeless. Sis Montaigne. In his favour, the Lexus has been quite a good form reference over the years. Sign-Off won it and come 4th a couple of years ago. Oceanographer won the Lexus last year, did flop in the Melbourne Cup, but did SP, I think, $8 or something like that. He's an on-pace runner, gives himself every chance, tries his guts out. The Waterhouse and Botyard is flying. There are his ticks. I think the negatives are his class. I surely can't see him holding off 23 runners here and winning. It's hard to lead a Melbourne Cup as well. He's got a 3-day backup. I'm not sure. Some horses run well, so I'm not sure if it's a negative because a lot of horses run well out of the Lexus. My Lucky Day was another one who comes second out of the Lexus. But traditionally, if a 3-day backup was so good, I think you'd see a lot more horses doing it on a regular basis outside of Melbourne Cup runs. Barrier 17's wide, but he'll come across, and his weight's beautiful, 50 kilos. I think there's some type of appeal there at $51, but I mean, I'm not going to back him. I just don't think he can win. I think he lacks the class. So that's it. That's my runner by runner guide. With the internationals, I don't have a great deal of confidence. What I am confident about is Marmello and Wall of Fire running good races. I think they're great each way bets. I think Mandan, I'm not as confident he's going to run as consistent or a strong race like Marmello and Wall of Fire because of his last start. There's a potential that maybe he just went over the top last start and he's not going that well. But the angle I took earlier, he definitely has the ability to win the race. If you go back 2 starts ago, if he reproduces that, he wins this. And that stable can do funny things and win the race. So I've actually got our Mandan on top because I think he's got probably the best winning chance. But I think he's got more chance of running poorly than Wall of Fire and Marmello. Got Marmello in for 2nd, Wall of Fire 3rd. And I've got Nikita in for 4th. I think he can run a good race coming out of that E-Ball handicap reference. There are a lot of other hopes, but that's my top 4. I'm on Big Duke each way already at $41 from Futures Bets. I've got a small ticket on Emily Start, 61. And I'll be backing, out of those top 4, I'm not too sure how I'm going to tackle the race yet. But Amanda's my tip. If somebody asks me who do I think is going to win the Melbourne Cup, I'll tell them, a lot of once-a-year punters just want one tip. They don't want to back 3 runners. I'll be going with our Mandan. But you can back 2 runners here. Don't feel ashamed to back 2 runners because they're long prices. So that's it. Enjoy the day. It's obviously a great day for everybody. It's a big day for the country. Once again, if you want my tips and analysis on the other races, the other 9 races on the card, check out the other YouTube video on the Hands and Heels Racing channel and follow our Facebook page. I post YouTube links on there and I also post my tips on there as well. So enjoy the Melbourne Cup, and once again, busy week. I'll be back for an Oaks Day preview. Enjoy the day, guys, and I hope you can back a winner. Cheers.